Hello and welcome to the publication of the latest wave in the Onside Sport Industry Monitor, taken in collaboration with members of the Sport for Business community. This is a piece of research which we kicked off in the very dark days, very early days of COVID-19 last March. We have progressed from there with a number of questions that still relate to the pandemic and the confidence and optimism that people will have coming out of it. But there is plenty of other elements within this that we can get a hold of as well. I'm delighted to be welcoming John Trainor, who's the founder and CEO of Onside. John, this has been a journey. We're into wave 4 now. How do you feel that it's progressed as a market research specialist?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pleased that we took the opportunity to launch the study back in March of last year, and I suppose to begin the journey of taking the sentiment and the pulse of the sports industry on a quarterly basis. I suppose when we began to write the questionnaire back then, we were probably loaded up with questions around the immediate impacts of COVID, but we've used this wave to begin the process, I suppose, of moving into a more consistent set of questioning that introduces measures that will hopefully be more useful and encouraging around the long-term future for sport and for sponsorship within the industry. So, we've introduced in this way, for example, questions around business in Ireland and how they feel about the various sports organisations. And the opportunities that they feel that each sports organisation provides, and equally in terms of how that may have changed over the last 6 months. So really pleased that we've now set that very important benchmark into the study, having released some of the space that we probably had to use initially around COVID-related matters.
There is a real depth to it, and there's some great insight from the 120 organizations that actually did take part in it. So it's a very good, very strong representative group of people. Before we get to that, though, let's just have a look at COVID, the impact that it's still having and the impact that it will have over the coming months as well, because it is the number one agenda on any sporting organization. Looking at it, we've asked the question now over 4 waves of people's confidence in a return to normality, into their own particular sectors actually coming out of this, and perhaps coming out of it almost as strong as they went into it as well. What have been the findings now in wave 4 in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the industry have shown a coping with COVID that is, is quite positive and encouraging the sentiment in this wave on measures such as how concerned they are about the impacts of COVID on the economy and on their own industry sectors and on the sponsorship industry. We're definitely seeing the most positive scores and the most positive sentiment, and a real easing of concern, I suppose. If you take, for example, concerns around the impacts of COVID on the economy, that's improved by 11% since our last wave. And from a sponsorship industry perspective, there's been an improvement or a reduction in the degree of concern within the industry to the level of 12%. So, these aren't linear changes; these are exponential in terms of the kind of improvement that we're seeing. And I think there's a reason behind some of this, and I think the practical reality is that there's been clearly activity happening, and particularly from our own read on sponsorship deals that are being done. There's been a real improvement in activity in Q1 that is obviously helping to fuel and drive this. So, for example, the deals that have been done by Sports Direct around Cork GAA, the deals that have been done by Weetabix around the Football Association of Ireland, Shamrock Rovers and 888. All of these deals have played their part in contributing to the boosting of the confidence, I suppose, that that we're seeing through this wave of research.
One of the numbers that jumped out to me as well was the fact that 17% of the sponsors had said that they had to withdraw from one, at least, of the sponsorship arrangements that they were in with, but 42% had said that they had entered into new sponsorships, just like those ones that you mentioned there as well. So it's a positive metric which outweighs the negative as well. And there's been a change as well in terms of the challenges and the concern that people have with regards to the challenges. There was one figure that stood out from the September wave that 49% said that they were concerned over the management of partnerships between rights holders and sponsors. But that's really come down significantly now in this wave, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think, there's definitely been, I suppose, moving on to a next phase in terms of that whole nature of the relationship between sponsors and rights holders. There was obviously a challenge and a tension caused through the initial discussions that needed to be had around, well, what's the impact of all of this on our deals and our agreements and our arrangements. But there's definitely been a fairly sharp drop in, I suppose, the degree of tension. And in terms of practical realities, 60% of the stakeholders in the industry have already gone into those negotiations. So they're well down the road in terms of their negotiations. And many of them have been successful. So 43% of them have already agreed, here's the change that we need to make to our agreement to move on and to get past this. Another 36% have agreed a short-term arrangement with a view to revisiting any other impacts that may happen across 2021. So I think it's helpful that those discussions and those conversations are advanced, and in a lot of cases, by having them resolved, it's allowing the organisations to get back onto the partnership platform that they were built on in the first place.
The contribution into this is very much based on that stakeholders, its agencies, its rights holders, its sponsoring organisations. One of the interesting questions is their degree of confidence about how some of the key events of the summer are going to take place. And there is a fairly wide range in terms of the optimism, ranging from 80% plus that are confident that the GAA championships will take place, down to quite a bit lower than that in terms of whether the British and Irish Lions tour will go ahead as planned down to South Africa. What are some of the ones that jumped out to you from that?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously the two ends of the scale. So the hurling championships and football championships are definitely, really high up in terms of the belief within the industry that these things will happen and these will play out. I suppose, again, you've got the Olympics, which are the big events this summer. And again, we're looking at significant proportions. So we're definitely looking at 6 in 10 of the industry who believe that the Olympics and the Paralympics will proceed, and that those will see some form of natural conclusion. So I think, the industry have realized that worst case scenario, these events can happen behind closed doors. So I think there's no real sense at this stage that these events, many of these events won't happen. It's more about whether they'll happen behind closed doors or not.
And we did ask the question as well of confidence over getting the fans back into stadium. The optimism isn't quite as high there, is it?
No, that's a little bit of a clangor in the number set in terms of overall sentiment. So a little bit scary, I suppose, in terms of, in particular, when we asked lots of different scales from 25% attendees in the audience to the dream or the ultimate scenario, which is 76 to 100%. And when we asked the industry, when will we see 76 to 100% of attendees in the venue, we're looking at the first half of 2022, 20% of people said, yeah, it would probably be then. 33% said it would probably be the second half of 2022 before we see full stadia or full venues again. And then 36% said that we think it's probably when the majority of the public have their vaccine. So that does feel a little bit, like a long run for stadiums to see full crowds. But that was the only chink, I suppose, in the story.
I guess we've probably taken on board the fact that we don't want to be disappointed anymore. So maybe there's a greater sense of realism in there, and perhaps the numbers that we can see getting back will begin to rise as well. We'll see it in the UK over the coming weeks. They're expecting much bigger audiences, and if it works, then maybe it's something that we can benefit from as well.
Yeah.
Moving along to some of those other areas that in the longer term may have been impacted by what's happened over the past year, but certainly are trends and opportunities that are going to be there for long after we've forgotten all about the restrictions that are in place at the moment. Some of those that really stand out, that caught your eye and that caught mine, clearly live streaming is something which has got a very firm place in the minds of both rights holders and sponsors. But what were some of the other trends that you thought, that looked particularly strong from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to see what rights holders are planning and what they're hoping for. And as you say, live streaming is absolutely on the to-do list of the bulk of rights holders that we surveyed. But there's already early intentions and signals from the rights holder side around investing in potentially dedicated apps that they believe will form the basis of how they can return to sport in the right shape and form. Exciting to see, suggestions around new camera perspectives being introduced into sport, match and player data and personalization and virtual reality are all in the consideration set for at least a third, if not 4 in 10 of rights holders in the market. So there's a positive plan in place within rights holders' view of how they see the future. Similarly, on the sponsor side of the fence, live streaming and personalization are definitely top of their agenda. But virtual reality and match day player data are important. I think what really stood out for me was looking at the impacts on how likely people are to invest in sponsorship in certain areas. The rise and the again exponential rise in the amounts of people who are planning to invest in community and grassroots is very significant. So we've seen an increase of 24% who are saying I'm a lot more likely to invest in community and grassroots. Similarly, in terms of sustainability initiatives, which was kind of coming before COVID, but it's back. And we saw a 56% increase in the people who are back saying I'm a little or a lot more likely to be bringing sustainability into my sponsorship thinking. And then obviously after the weekend, we've just seen women's sport, again, 34% of people who are saying I'm a lot or a little more likely to be investing in women's sport, going forward. So lots of, positive plans and growing plans, positive intentions around actually investing in some of these types of developments.
The report, as we said, is chock-a-block full of real good insight. It's available to those organizations who took part in it. These are literally just the edited highlights. The full report runs to 40 pages, and that will be sent out and sent to those who have taken part in it as members of the Sport for Business community over the coming days. We will be coming back to it as well, because this is something now which has established a benchmark in difficult times, yes, but in times that will show us the benefit of what we've been able to learn from this and adapt. So we'll be going back out into the audience in the summer. But for the moment anyway, if you want any more information on it, you can contact John. info@onside.ie is the best email to get him on, and or you can contact Rob at sportforbusiness.com as well. And we're happy to talk about it, because there really is a good roadmap as to not only how we're going to get out of this, but in what direction we're going to be pointing when we do so. So for the moment anyway, for John Trainor from Onside, it's been a pleasure doing this fourth wave with you, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Rob.